But because we lived in Ontario, we needed to comply with TICO rules. So we actually got a cease and desist from TICO. This was like in September of 23. And it was literally like, shut down your business in 7 days or we will fine you. And then there's a potential to also go to jail. People don't understand, like the investors over here have like no context towards, the continent, in general. It's like, you have to do the educational piece of like educating them about, everything that goes on ground and like, that Africa's not a country, like it's a continent and it's a huge market. No one ever said like, we're going to quit. Like we can't do this. Like everything was like, what are we going to do? Like, what's the next step? What's the next action we need to take? Everyone was ready to leave Ontario.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Beauty by Visible. I'm your host, Dami, and today I'm here with Joshua. Hi Josh, how you doing?
Good, how you doing?
Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you, and I'm really excited to chat about what you're building. I remember us meeting, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it must have been at the
Collision
Collision
after party.
Yeah.
And you basically just like give like a picture of what you were working on. I thought it was really cool. And so when I decided to do this podcast, I felt like you were going to be a really good person to talk to, because at that point I didn't really know much about like the safari and like the travel space. And I haven't really gotten to meet a lot of founders that are building for the travel space. In the African space, we have people mostly building fintech products, which is needed. But it's always very nice to meet people that are building things that are not fintech. And so I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about the travel space, learn a little bit more about what you're building and what the future looks like.
Yeah, I got a lot of insights on it now. Honestly, it's been a couple of years working on it now, but I'll probably start rambling on and on about this. So you're gonna have to tell me to like shut up at some
No,
times.
I love the story, so I'm really excited about that. I want us to start from your background. So I know you're Waterloo trained, and you started out as a founding engineer, but before that, at like a YC-backed startup. But before that, you actually founded a startup called Phros.
Yes.
Is it pronounced Phros?
Phros,
my bad.
Yeah.
What was the idea behind that? And what was Phros? Like, so for people who have no context, can you maybe?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, yeah, Phros. So yeah, number one with the name, no one could ever pronounce it, which was always like, we were always thinking about switching the name, but it just stuck for the time being.
Yeah.
So actually before Phros, I actually had started CloudSafaris. This was in 2019, at the end of 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, so ended up building up some software over there, sold it to a couple tour operators, travel agencies in East Africa. Then 2020, beginning, COVID hit. No one had money in travel.
Yeah.
And so myself and my co-founder were like, okay, well, we can't be pushing travel products anymore. So we need to actually switch to something else. So Phros actually spun up at the time. We literally built pretty much like a Shopify, but for like fitness influencers. Mm-hmm. So we saw there was a whole wave of fitness influencers pushing their content on Instagram. They were trying to sell live classes. They were trying to create workout programs. And then we saw it was all on the basis of like people were sending out Zoom links manually. They were creating PDFs for their customers or for their clients. And we're like, okay, like we need to actually like make this a little bit more professional for these people instead of actually just them doing, like the same process that they had. So that's what Phros was. We built a whole like software suite around fitness influencers. Actually, they could sign up to our product. They could build a website on our product itself, and then they could actually just list their live classes, sell it to their customers directly. And yeah, that was kind of like what Phros was in a nutshell. But that was a journey itself. That was about 2 years before we actually sunset Phros, and then just went full time on. Just went to CloudSafaris right after.
A couple of things I actually want to dig into. So you said you started CloudSafaris first.
Yeah.
What's the story around that? Like, why was that something that you decided to work on at that point?
Yeah. So a little background. So my family's been tour operators in Tanzania, East Africa, for over 50 years. So they've been in the travel space, running the tours for former President Jimmy Carter, for National Geographic. So if you booked a trip with, National Geographic, our family's company would actually be the company on ground that would be running the trips. Yeah. But so cool, anyways, so we've always been kind of like deeply rooted in the travel space. And I've always heard about safaris growing up. Like my dad would be telling me about stories about, them going out in the bush and actually just going on like different like game drives and stuff. And yeah, so in 2019, I got the opportunity to go back to Tanzania. And at the time I went solo, went to climb Kilimanjaro, went to go on safari as well, just learned a little bit more about the family business. And then at the end of my trip, I actually went to my cousin's coffee farm in Tanzania. There's this area close to Karatu in Tanzania, if you know the area. But I was sitting down with my cousin in the night, literally just like serene. It was like, in the night, we could see all the stars, and we just had a very deep conversation around travel tech and the way that they were actually selling safaris, and realized it was very backwards. And, at the time I was in Waterloo, learning how to actually like build software at the time. And so, yeah, that kind of like sparked the idea of, okay, hey, like there's something here that we can actually like do.
That is so interesting. One of the things that a question that I actually have around just your background with Waterloo is just wanting to dive a little bit into that, just because Waterloo is now known to be the like birth house, we want to say, of a lot of like African founders. So we've had like, Ian come out of there, and we've had some of the co-founder of Andela come out of there. What was that experience like, just kind of being in that environment? There's just a lot of like, and even like outside the African space, there's a lot of, there's just like a lot of demand for Waterloo computer science students, because like they maybe make the best founders, or they make the best founding engineers, or just because of like that environment. So I actually want to get into that. Like, what was being in that environment like, and how did that impact everything else that you did after?
It's stressful.
I can imagine, yeah.
I don't know if you've seen there's all these like memes on Instagram coming up now. They'll take like a picture of like the first year like engineering like students.
I've seen those.
Yeah, like 4 years later, 5 years later, it's like what they look like after.
Yeah.
So it was honestly damn stressful. Not gonna lie. Waterloo, honestly, it's like there's a whole cult and like a whole, maybe cult's not the right word, but like it's a whole culture around like startups and startup building. And honestly, that was the reason what actually drew me to the school. I've always been kind of like a builder. I love building things. I love creating my own things. And so, that kind of, I was drawn into that ecosystem from there. Obviously, the computer science engineering side of things at Waterloo is huge. And from the nature of it, it ends up being a really good space, primarily because of the co-op program. And so you got to switch between, like school and work. So we would do 4 months school, 4 months work, 4 months school, 4 months work. And in between is when you really build up your experience actually, being on a job. It's very different to actually just working rather than just, reading things in a textbook or like doing your class assignments and stuff. So that's honestly, there was the culture, I think, around Waterloo, and like the emphasis around like engineering, computer science and everything is primarily from, honestly, I would say the co-op side of things. And then from a startup perspective, to be honest, I don't know what really was the reason. I think like I'm going to make a hypothesis here. A lot of the grads from Waterloo end up in either San Francisco or New York. And so you have a lot of these founders going to these places. Because number one, they pay a lot of money after grad. And then naturally going into SF, it's like you learn from the best, you get to work from the best, and there's a huge startup ecosystem around there. And so that kind of like bred this whole ground of, like, this is my hypothesis again, but bred this ground of a lot of the engineers, computer scientists, and just a lot of entrepreneurs in Waterloo in general, just because there was this kind of affiliation between, I don't know, Waterloo, SF, as an example. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on that.
So for you, because you ended up joining a company, a YC-backed company, as a founding engineer, and then you ended up building Phros, you ended up building CloudSafaris and focusing on that. Was there kind of like a toggle going on there at that point? Like, why? Because I'm asking this because you mentioned the startup culture being the reason why, or the like entrepreneurship culture of the school being one of the reasons why you wanted to like go there. But then you ended up like starting your own thing, but you ended up also joining like a company. Like, so I want to know if that was something that you actually planned, or if it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah. I always knew I wanted to have like my own company and build. That was it. And so for me, it was like, what's the fastest way in order for me to actually get there? So the getting into Waterloo was okay. I heard about the startup culture, and like, so I graduated from a program called management engineering at the University of Waterloo. I was in mechanical first, switched to management. But anyways, I got into Waterloo from the notion of startups to begin with. As soon as I got into Waterloo, they had all these programs in-house. It was like Velocity, Concept, were like, I guess like incubators, accelerators in Waterloo. So would always attend those sessions. My first co-op term, I actually took the co-op term off to actually just start my own thing.
Oh, nice.
And so I was actually building digital, like it was more of like a digital agency, to be honest, that I was doing for like actually for safari operators in Africa. I just started from there just because family connections in. I thought there was a way for me to get in there. I failed really hard that first term. I realized it was going to be very difficult for me to, make money. I thought it would be making money like quick overnight. Obviously not the case. And so then what led me to joining, startups after throughout like the rest of the co-ops that I was in, and then full-time after at the YC company was like, how can I get the best experience the fastest way and like learn from the best people who are, already, 10 steps ahead and like where I want to be. So that was the notion of, okay, every other company I joined after that, as part of my co-op was either, joining a startup or actually just working on my own startup later on. And then after Waterloo was, okay, how can I put myself in the best position to learn from the best? And so that's when I joined the YC-backed company, and I was there for about like 2.5, 3 years.
That's really smart. Okay, so let's go back to now the journey to the solo trip to Tanzania in 2019 and what came out of that. So you took this trip, you learned a lot, met with your cousin, had a conversation. How did that then lead to CloudSafaris? Yeah,
so 2019, after I got back from Tanzania, finished up the school term, and then right after that, I was getting into a co-op. I actually just got an offer from Wayfair in Boston, and then I ended up rejecting the offer because I wanted to actually take a shot at CloudSafaris. So I was like, okay, like if this is the time to do it now, it'd be nice to work, to get paid by a Boston-based company, but like if I need to do this, I need to take the risk and like go at it now. So the basis was I started learning a lot more about what the problems were that were faced on ground by these local operators. And so just to give more context on like how a lot of this works, if you were to book a safari online, you would typically reach out to either a travel agent or you'd reach out to a local tour operator directly in Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, Botswana, wherever it is. And what happens is you have a very back and forth process with them. You will email them, ask them for an itinerary with pricing, telling them like who you're going to be traveling with, when you want to travel, etc. These people would get back to you with essentially PDFs or just an email on like, this is what your itinerary would be. If you're going to be spending like $10,000 on a trip, it's like you want to make sure that you're very comfortable with the operator that you're booking with. And so when I got back after Tanzania that term, my first thing was, okay, how can we actually build software to make the process of creating, beautifully crafted itineraries and give those to customers within the span of seconds? And so the first software that I built up was on the basis of that was, okay, giving these like digital itineraries to tour operators on ground. And so that they can actually create these beautiful itineraries that they could give to their customers, and creating some automated things so that they wouldn't even have to actually build the itineraries, but they would be auto-generated and given out. So that was that. Honestly, I built out the first version in a month. And then from there, honestly, we started selling to local tour operators in Kenya and Tanzania, got a couple people, paying customers on board, which was great.
Yeah.
And then obviously that's when COVID hit, like right after. And so, no one had money.
I wanted to learn a little bit more about just selling to like the local operators. I know, you have relationships in Tanzania. Your family has a store operator business. I think that could have helped. But I also want to know, like, how were you able to get more people on board with the platform that you had built at that time? Yeah.
So honestly, it was very like, I don't want to say hard work. It was grunt work.
Yeah.
So for us, it was literally at the time, I would curate lists, literally scraping some sites I probably shouldn't have scraped.
Yeah.
For contact information for all these different people, setting up a WhatsApp account, and then messaging all these people on WhatsApp directly. And so we had like obviously the family relations on ground, but to be honest, like my parents had exited the company when they left to come to Canada. And so like my uncles and cousins are the ones who are running the company on ground. So didn't really navigate it from the relationship standpoint on that side. We had them that we could lean off of for any advice. But primarily what I was doing was selling was actually just reaching out to these different operators, different travel companies on WhatsApp, just like messaging their managing directors, their CEOs directly, and then finding any way to get on a call. I had like lists of, thousands of companies, and I literally just go through it, WhatsApp message every single one of them. Finally, one would hit, we'd get on a call with someone, we try to learn more about like the problems that they're facing, introduce the product, and then try to make the sale. But it was literally just like a lot of grunt work to get that.
So then you did all that work. You had, made some sales and you had some paying customers and the pandemic hit. What was going through your mind in that period?
Yeah. I mean, when COVID hit,
Yeah.
honestly, so when COVID hit, I was like, honestly, like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
Like, this is gonna be. I have no idea, like, when we're actually gonna be able to. I have no. People aren't paying anymore on ground. I have no idea when we're actually going to be able to, really take a good stab at this product next, because didn't know when COVID was gonna end, kind of thing. And so I had to really think about it at a company standpoint at the time. Like, what am I going to do in order to actually, help these local operators on ground instead? So we ended up changing the product. So we ventured into another idea, which is actually like virtual tours. So we took this example actually from Airbnb. Airbnb was launched some like virtual tours online to help like small to medium sized businesses and these local operators. And so we spun up that. We ended up pitching to and like interviewing a lot of local operators on ground to see if it was something that would be plausible for them to do. And then quickly realized that wasn't going to work. There weren't a lot of people that were actually interested in it, and it was going to take us time to actually make money on the product, anyways. And so switch from that, and then we're like, okay, instead of us like charging tour operators per month on a transaction, like monthly SaaS fee, instead we're going to charge transaction fees instead on Safari, so we can actually end up getting booked with people. And so the hypothesis at the time was you can get really discounted trips in East Africa. You can get really discounted trips in Botswana, Namibia, across the board. And so we ended up onboarding operators at the time just to list their packages directly on our website. And so we ended up building out a marketplace from that. And then again, realized 2 months later, hey, well, this is not really going anywhere. We had a couple tour operators sign up, which was awesome. We had people from Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. And then shortly after that, we're like, okay, like it's going to take time for us to actually get customers coming in, and trying to build it as a startup in the travel space during COVID was just not really a good option for us. And so, that's when we made the transition to Phros actually.
So then for Phros, you were the one that noticed. Or was it just like a team thing, or was it just like an idea that you had and then pitched to the team?
Yeah, we had a couple friends who were running like their fitness pages online, and then I was just trying to understand like their process of like what they were doing. We had interviewed a bunch of people. The first basis before we build anything, to be honest, we always interview people to understand like really what their problems are. And so we interviewed a bunch of these, fitness influencers. We would go onto these Facebook groups, like these Facebook mom groups, honestly, where they had like all these like fitness people like trying to sell stuff. And like we would literally just send them messages being like, hey, like, like we're students from the University of Waterloo, or like we just graduated from the University of Waterloo. Like would love your like, an hour of your time or 30 minutes of your time just to talk about, what you're doing. And then we did that kind of time and time again. And we're like, okay, like we've spoke with a couple people. We've heard this is a problem. Let's go ahead and let's build for it. So, yeah.
So Phros, you were able to, take those insights and turn it into a product, and you were able to get some paying customers into the platform. But then the pandemic ended.
Yeah.
So then what was the rationale? Like, how were you able to make the decision to shut down Phros and then pick up back in CloudSafaris? And what was like the whole story behind that switch?
Yeah. So I think I learned a ton of things being at Phros, and like just running the company. Number one,
how long did you run it for? How long did it go?
Honestly, we sunset the product last year in January, February. But honestly, things were running like on their own. We had customers who were still paying for us like month over month. Like the product was running itself, but we made no product improvements. We were literally like, we were working on CloudSafaris at the time, and we just let it kind of just go off to the side. And then we officially made the decision to shut it down like last year, January, February, around that time. Anyways, I learned a lot from Phros itself. Learned number one, we over-engineered that product like crazy. Like we were building things that we did not need to build. We built literally an entire website builder. Like there's no reason for us to do that.
Yeah.
Like you have Shopify, Wix, Squarespace, all these different website builders online. It's like we did not actually have to do something like that. We built workout planners where there were already apps that were available that trainers were already using. And so we ended up just, instead of us going deeper into our customers and the problems that they were facing and improving on the current product that we had, we ended up just building new things, and like honestly learned a lot from just the whole process of like you shouldn't be over engineering things. Like focus on the core problems and then just nail those down completely before you work on anything else. And it's like second to that was at the time, you know, for us, we were selling for like, we sold that product for very cheap amount to a couple customers. And I learned very quickly that like you need to actually price your products really well. Because then you end up getting people who will just kind of take advantage for you for like the little amounts that they're paying. So we had people who had, you know, sign up, they would use all our tech and everything. They were paying about like $120 for the year. And it's like, at that point, it's like, I would get calls and messages for them in the night and in the morning sometimes. And then honestly, at some point I had to actually like fire some of the customers, just being like, hey, like, I think you should switch off to like a different product because we can't make the changes that you want, and giving them a whole comparison about like kind of what we do. But learned about pricing from that standpoint. And then anyways, where that kind of transition, getting back into CloudSafaris, if I'm going to be honest, so I was running CloudSafaris probably up until like, Phros up until like the beginning of 2022 before like kind of went on autopilot after. Honest story. I actually was, I went through a pretty rough breakup at the time. And so that honestly, like I'd stopped building Phros at the time because we weren't even growing it at the point. At that point, I was like, okay, well, yeah. Anyways, that was a whole lot of the story itself. But after that, I was like, okay, like I kind of want to travel. I want to go back to Tanzania. And also I know the problems that like we were solving before are still unsolved. So you know what? We went back into speaking with local operators on ground. We had, 50 conversations with people across, Kenya, Tanzania, Botswana, Zimbabwe, just exploring the same conversation over and over again about like, what are the core problems that they're facing and like, what are the current solutions that they have? And then just really trying to understand what the market was. And then, the notion after that was, okay, like I booked a one-way flight to Tanzania with my co-founders. And I was like, okay, like we're going to go back and let's figure something out. And that was transition back.
How easy was it to convince the team to make this switch? Because, I mean, you spent a ton of time and effort working on Phros. And so it's like, okay, working on CloudSafari, then working on Phros, and then now we're back to CloudSafaris, and it's a lot of back and forth. For someone that doesn't maybe understand the nature of software and the need to pivot, like, did you maybe a better way to phrase the question is, did you have to spend a lot of effort trying to convince the team about the pivots and about like the rationale behind the pivots?
I think deep down as founders, you kind of know when things aren't working. And so for Phros itself, Phros, I was running that with Aiden, one of my co-founders. And, we kind of like, we had the gut feeling that it wasn't working. Like we weren't growing, like things were like kind of staying stagnant. We had over-engineered a lot. Like the product wasn't just shaped up. It didn't shape up too nice, to be honest. And then, so the decision to then when I went to Tanzania was with my other co-founder, Marcus. The decision to do that, honestly, it was actually a pretty easy one to make from the nature of a couple things. One, like Phros itself wasn't going anywhere at the time. Marcus was working full-time at a job. He wanted to get into the software space. And so I was living with him at the time and literally just pitched him on what we were doing, told him, hey, let's go and do this. And then for us, it was a very nice thing. Just from the basis, if you looked at it like externally, startup aside, it's like I get to live with like literally like my brothers for like in Tanzania, like, country they've never been to before. We get to live there on ground, experience how it is to like, be around like the locals over there and interact, not just like going on safaris, like on a vacation or whatever. And you get to like be in the warm weather, skip the winter. Plus also we get to build when we're there too. So, and at the time we were bootstrapping everything as well. So it was like our companies that we worked for at the time. So when I was at the YC company and then when Marcus was at his full time as well, they were both okay with us actually just being abroad and working like remotely. And so it was a no-brainer. It was like, okay, like good weather, you get good food, surrounded by good people. It's also very affordable to live there. It's like, okay, like let's go experience how it is out there for, 6 months and see how it is.
So what did you learn from that experience?
From being in Tanzania at the time?
For just like going back. And how different was that from the first time too?
First time going back. Well, first I've been back like times before with like my family. But in 2019 when I went solo, it was more like a vacation, to be honest. I went there with the intention of climbing Kilimanjaro and then just to go on safari.
Did you train for that?
Kilimanjaro, yeah.
How did that
Initially,
go? Like,
yeah, it was a tough journey.
imagine.
So I've actually climbed Kilimanjaro twice now.
Oh wow.
But okay,
Wow.
backtrack. The second time I climbed is because my sister wanted to climb,
Oh.
and she told me like she wasn't gonna climb unless I climbed with her. And I was like, "Hey, are you gonna pay for me to climb?" She's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." Like
Oh,
that was it.
wow.
And so I was actually supposed to be taking care of her that second trek. And literally by day 4, it hit me hard. Like I was in a tent. I woke up like cold towel over my face. Like my sister's a nurse and she was like in the tent just making sure I was okay.
Yeah.
Like it was bad the second time.
my
But the first time, yeah, honestly trained quite a bit. And then but the one thing you can't prep for is the altitude. It's
Yeah.
like once you hit like 4,000 meters, like if it hits you, like it can get bad.
People that climb mountains, I think you guys are superstars. You can never pay me.
You definitely can. I found that don't picture me as a mountain climber or anything. This is just like out of whim. I thought it was like me climbing Kilimanjaro the first time, to be honest, is gonna sound kind of whack, but like I thought it was like my passage to becoming a man.
Oh wow.
That was like I was like, okay, I gotta go climb this mountain because
Yeah.
like, my family's done it. My family's Tanzania, and like
Yeah.
I gotta go conquer this mountain now. That was it. But yeah, anyways, that was that. Sorry, I forgot the
We're
question.
talking about
Yeah.
We're talking about just the experience of going back, right? Going back with your co-founders especially and how that was like.
Yeah. So being back there the second time, so first time was a vacation pretty much. Second time going back was with the intention of work. We actually went back with CloudSafaris being an idea of actually almost like a fintech, like cross-border payments using like
I'm glad
Ethereum.
you didn't do that.
Yeah. Seriously. And so we were part of some like pitch competitions over here where we actually pitched out like using Ethereum to send cross-border payments into Africa. And the basis of that was that when you book with the local tour operator, people would send, tens of thousands of dollars in wire transfer fees to a local operator on ground that you might have never met before.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to actually build something around like, the Ethereum ecosystem and actually sending payments cross-border in that basis. When we arrived there on ground, it was like, okay, well, this is not going to work. Number one, we completely misunderstood kind of like the problem and the scope of what we had to do. And so we were living at the time with my cousins in Tanzania, and that was like an absolute blessing. They are safari operators on ground. We were living at their house, and we got to experience day in, day out, like the problems that they were facing. So what turned into, initially what we thought like going on ground with like the itinerary creation software that we were doing from before, it turned into very quickly, okay, how are they actually processing and selling safaris like on ground? What we found was a lot of it was very paper pushed. It was all via spreadsheets, PDFs, emails. That's where a lot of the pricing information lived. That's where a lot of their data lived. And so you would plan a trip. They would plan a trip with their travelers. Let's say you wanted to go on safari in Tanzania. You would send them a message. They would get back to you with an itinerary. They, in the background, are doing all the work to check for availability at accommodations by sending them emails. They're looking at PDFs to check for pricing to see how much it's going to cost for 2 adults to stay in one room together. So they would do all this information and like checks in the background, which would take them a long time. They would send you back a quote. And as soon as you change your travel date by 1 day,
that whole thing.
Exactly. So us living there on ground and with them was a huge blessing, because this time, like this approach, instead of, the first time was vacation, this time was for work. So, we would have like our jobs, we would work. It worked well with the time zones because we would do, CloudSafaris work during the day in East African time, and then our work over here in the nights. But essentially we learned a lot from actually just living with them on ground. We would have whiteboard sessions, during the day about like the processes that they would go through, the issues that they were facing, the systems that they were using, the systems that they had explored using. So it was honestly the second approach to going on ground was like a very good time for us to actually learn like the fundamentals of like the industry and what goes on. Yeah.
And so for pitches, right? So I'm thinking about like when you're pitching this to an investor, or did you guys ever like do that? Like do the pitches to investors?
Yeah. So
I wonder how you're able to manage that, or how you guys were able to at that time manage that, especially because like the safari space isn't something that a lot of people have context into, and you had context into because of your family. And there's a lot of like just knowledge that you're able to glean also just from living with your cousins. How are you able to communicate that to investors that maybe didn't have as much context as you did?
Yeah, honestly, it's tough.
Yeah.
It still is tough even today. There's the component of trying to, trying to explain to investors right now, number one, how big the market is.
Yeah.
And it's like, people don't understand, like the investors over here have like no context towards, the continent, in general. It's like, you have to do the educational piece of like educating them about, everything that goes on ground, and like, that Africa is not a country, like it's a continent, and it's a huge market, especially for, safaris, travel and tourism. And so even today, we're still doing that educational piece. And so we have to balance between, how do we actually approach this from the fundamentals of a business, and then also educating people about, what's actually going on like across Africa and like the market itself. And so, yeah, we still have to do that to date. Like our pitches then, our pitches now, it's like there still always is like an educational component in the pitch, but it's like now it's the basis of like our metrics will speak for themselves. And so people will see the metrics, and then when they hear about the opportunity, it's like, that's where, they can see, and they're more open to actually like having conversations. We found actually, and this is like the first time when we were doing our pitches, so we raised around last year just from like some angels. But prior to that, we were actually doing like a bunch of pitches to different VCs and investors in, across North America. And every time we would have a really good pitch, we would have a great pitch, and they would like kind of love what we were doing. And as soon as we mentioned Africa, they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't touch Africa." And it was like, that was like a big hurdle to get through, to be honest, because it's like, okay, you have to approach things from an educational standpoint, like, and you also have to find the right people who actually believe in what's going on, like, across the continent.
Do you find that educational piece is still there if you are trying to pitch like an African VC?
No, not as much. And so with an African VC, they have a lot more context on ground to what's going on. It's like they already know that, it's a huge growing population across the continent. They understand like, the market size and like the potential, from, 10, 20, 50 years from now. So there's less of an educational component going on ground, then it focuses more on the metrics. The tricky side about, navigating it with, African focused VCs is to be honest, it's like the valuations that you get are much lower than what you would get actually approaching a VC in the US. And so you have to balance really well of like who you want to bring on. And so then it goes into deeper conversations which I've had with our co-founders as well, and then some VCs, but it's also from a strategic lens. For us, it actually could make more sense for us to go with an African-based VC, even if it might mean a lower valuation, but they might actually be a little bit more strategic to us. On the flip side, if we work with some of the travel tech VCs in the US, they could actually open up distribution doors to, some bigger companies that we want to connect with now. So it really is just a combination of like, you're playing a game across both. Like, yeah.
I want to talk about the angels, because you mentioned that you were able to raise some around from like angels. But before we go there, what was the journey to that point, right? So I'm trying to just trace things from the last place you stopped. So you stopped at the whiteboarding sessions when you were living with when you and your co-founders were living with your cousins. So how did you get from that point? What was the journey from that point to the point where you were able to raise with the angels?
Yeah. It's a long journey. Maybe it'd be good to actually just give some context on like what CloudSafaris is, what we do right now. So CloudSafaris as a whole, what we're doing, and I'm going to say some buzzwords right now, but we're building like trip booking for emerging markets. And so we're using a lot of AI right now to actually turn these spreadsheets, emails, PDFs into digital products that we can actually then sell to Expedia's, the bookings.com, and like these larger travel agencies and online travel agencies. So they can use our tech to actually book trips in emerging markets. That's like the core of what we're doing right now.
Is there still a consumer side to that? Like as a consumer, am I still able to just go on the platform, and if maybe I don't want to go through there, am I able to just go on the platform and then book like a safari trip? Yeah.
So that'll lead into the journey now.
Okay.
When we left, so essentially we lived in Tanzania, Kenya for 6 months.
And that was in 2022?
This was in, end of 2022. We moved there, and then we were there until like April of 2023, April 2023. So at the time we came back over here, and we had started to shape up the first build for the product. We were going direct to consumer. So the whole thing was, let's pitch CloudSafaris as a brand. We're going to sell direct to travelers. And so we built the first version of our product, and the first version of our product actually connected into all these different inventory systems on ground. And we took a lot of the PDFs that we got and we digitized those and we put them pretty much as packages on our site. And then we were selling direct to consumers at the time. And so we got to a point where we were literally pushing that out. A couple months later, so the crazy happened as well. This goes through like the whole journey.
Yeah.
But this was like 2023, end of September 2023. Being in Canada, being in Ontario, there's actually a travel regulator here called TICO. And so TICO, you can't actually operate and accept money from customers unless you have the licensing and the licensing with them. We were a US based company. We incorporated in Delaware. But because we lived in Ontario, we needed to comply with the TICO rules. So we actually got a cease and desist from TICO. This was like in September of 23. And it was literally like, shut down your business in 7 days or we will fine you. And then there's a potential to also go to jail. So it's like, the fines are like, you get fined up to $50,000 and like 2 years in jail. It's like, it was crazy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's actually nuts. And so we got that at the time. This was like, September 2023. And then spoke with my co-founders and we were kind of just like, okay, like one, how can we get this, like the TICO licensing right now sorted? Or two, what if we just left Ontario? So we had looked into options of actually just moving abroad, moving to honestly like Alberta where they didn't have like the travel regulations or just like, going to a different province.
Yeah.
And then we settled on just actually moving to Kenya. So,
okay.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, we pretty much like packed up our bags and we moved to Kenya. And we're like, okay, like we'll leave Ontario. Let's shift everything to Kenya now. We'll operate and we'll run out of there. But then also because we still had some ties to Ontario, we had to find a way to still get like the TICO licensing. And so we ended up joining like a traditional travel agency here. So myself, my co-founders, we all got our travel agent licenses. We joined a traditional travel agency and then we operated under them from the Canadian perspective. But at the time we're like, okay, let's go build out our stuff on ground in Kenya. Because it's going to be much more affordable to live there. Plus we'll be able to actually speak with the suppliers who are going to run our trips at the end of the day.
Two things. First thing, I'm like, okay, the fact that you were able to even get the attention of TICO means that like you guys were doing something right. So I would say like in my opinion, I feel like that was sort of a blessing or something. I don't know. How did you feel? I guess maybe in that moment you were probably focused on like the fine and the possibility of jail time. But for me, I'm like, okay, it's possibility of jail time. It's very crazy. But I think for me, it's like, okay, you were doing something that even caught their attention. Like there was like something going on there that they felt like they had to pay attention to. And I feel like that just kind of goes to show that you guys were actually doing like good numbers, in my opinion. Or do you have different opinion on that? Yeah,
so the actual story of how that happened, we joined a travel body in Ontario and we put in an application to join it.
Yeah.
The person who's going through the applications was the president of TICO.
Oh, okay.
So that's what happened. So as soon as he saw that, he's like, hey, I've never heard of this company before. Like, are they TICO licensed?
God.
No? Okay. Well, that was that. So that's actually what happened.
So that's actually what happened?
Yeah, that's actually what happened.
Just scratch that, I guess.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. How are you guys able to navigate that?
Yeah, that was a very stressful time.
Yeah.
But I remember getting that email and I was like, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Like, we need to figure out something though. But right now we're screwed. Like, I need to like figure out on like, okay, I'm going to leave my parents, leave my siblings here.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta get out of this province. But then also just like, it was it ended up being in hindsight, a really good moment for the team on two things. One, we ended up getting the travel regulation licensing sorted. It took some time later on, but we are now TICO licensed.
Yeah.
Two, the biggest thing was actually like, I got to see how like us as a team, our co-founders really worked under that stressful situation. And like, there was no one ever said like, we're going to quit. Like, we can't do this. Like, everything was like, what are we going to do? Like, what's the next step? What's the next action we need to take? Everyone was ready to leave Ontario. Like, and that was like, okay, like as a team,
blessing,
it's like you're going through a very stressful time. It's like, you want people who are going to be like in your corner at every single stressful moment. that was a very stressful time with the team, facing a $50,000 fine plus jail time.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was no question of, okay, let's just abandon this and work on something else. It was, okay, let's figure out how we can get around this. Let's figure out how we can get the licensing. And in the meantime, how we can continue to operate as a company. So that was honestly, it ended up being like a huge blessing, going through that situation, together.
That's a huge blessing, given that I know that companies or co-founders have split for less.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe what I want to know now is like how you went about finding your co-founders and how you've been able to manage that relationship, because I think it's a really great team you have, even just around like the pivot, right? Being able to pivot and then pivot back and you're still able to stay as a coherent team. I think that's a huge blessing. So how did you find them, and how are you able to manage that relationship?
Yeah. These guys are my brothers, honestly.
Yeah.
I met Marcus and Aiden at University of Waterloo. So we were all in school there. Aiden I met through a mutual friend group, and we got close from there. We ended up living together in second year and then in fourth year after that. And then Marcus was in my program. So Aiden was in mechatronics engineering at Waterloo, and then Marcus was in management engineering, so the program I was in. So we got close just from, working on school projects together and then going to different parties together. Like we would all just always be together. We ended up moving in together, like the three of us plus one of our other friends in fourth year. So we were all just living in the same place. And so this was like almost like at the start of like when we had started CloudSafaris in like 2020 beginning. But yeah, we had been through everything together. We had seen like the highs and the lows. Like we were just honestly like we lived really well together. Like we could live together, which is always like a blessing. If you can live with other people, that says a lot, number one. And yeah, we had just been through a lot of things together, like the highs and lows of, I don't know, like just different events going on, whether that's like, stress with school, breakups, new jobs, just a lot of different events that we went through. And so we kind of understood each other like as a team pretty much. The cool thing is to working with these guys, whether it was from Phros, the first version of CloudSafaris, or even just in school projects, it's like we got to understand like what their skill sets were. We got to understand, where everyone's expertise kind of lied, what people were interested in. And you got to see like the dedication that, these people had, this is aside from the startup side of things. And so we have a very good relationship. Honestly, it's, we can switch in the sense of like when we're at work, we will debate with each other for like a long time. And we will have some like, serious, like heated conversations sometimes. But the cool thing is like, as soon as we get back home, like in the evening, cause we all live together now too.
Oh, nice.
As soon as we get back home in like the evenings and like, I see these guys the entire day, but it's like, we can switch off. It's like, we switch off from like, that work to, just like joking around with each other. On the weekends too, we're able to do that. So yeah, I don't know. It's also, and like for me too, it's just like, just also from the basis of, Marcus and Aiden, co-founders, like I brought these guys to East Africa with me.
Yeah.
Like they never touched like step foot in the continent. Marcus had never left Canada. Like I think maybe we went on like one road trip to the States.
Yeah.
But like taking someone who's come from like Aurora, Ontario to Tanzania, literally living in Arusha, which is if you know of Arusha, it's a very small, quiet town. There's not much to go around. There's not much to do, to be honest. And so yeah, and like bringing Aiden out to Nairobi for the first time, and then living with him from like Nairobi going into Arusha too. Like yeah, it was just like we've been through a lot together. So I've been rambling. I could ramble on this.
No, they
but
sound amazing. That's just really great. I think for people that, I guess maybe the question for you now is like, for people that are out there trying to pick co-founders, maybe they have a product and they want to build something and they're not sure how to go about picking co-founders. How would you advise that they, make that selection?
It's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. Honestly,
just from your experience.
Yeah. You need to find like-minded people with the same values. In a weird way, it's almost like dating. But you need to find.
This is the second time this has come up, by the way. But you can go ahead.
Yeah. You honestly, you need to find people who are on the same page as you. It's like as co-founders, like we have a lot of really good. Our values are all aligned. And if our values didn't align, like I don't think we would be as trusting of each other. And we wouldn't have worked, to be honest, up to this point. So yeah, you need to find people who actually have like the same values as you, whether that's in the same workplace that you're in, potentially, at school, different clubs after or whatever, like if you continue to do the same, like your same daily activities, whether that's, fitness, run clubs, going to church on the weekends too, like different worship groups and everything. It's like you can find people who have similar values to you. And then it's just a matter of actually just exploring things further from like a startup basis.
Yeah.
That's honestly what I would say is like the best approach. I know they have all these like co-founder speed dating things, but I think at the end of the day, you just really need to align on values. Yeah. And if you're joining, or even if it's your idea as an example and you're bringing on a co-founder, it's like everything, honestly, in my opinion, should be like an equal split. Always, just because at the end of the day, you're going to go through 101 things together. So it's like you need everyone to have the same, like to be on the same page.
That's really wise. Yeah. So I kind of lit up when you talked about the co-founder relationship, like dating, because in a previous conversation I had, the person I was speaking to at that point, Sam, he also talked about how for him trying to find his co-founder, it was a dating relationship essentially, and they treat themselves like they're in a marriage of some sorts, like nothing. Yeah. But just like, so there's a lot of communication that happens. There's a lot of trying to make time for the friendship. There's a lot of like trying to figure out how to manage conflict. There's like a lot of that dynamics, and that's what makes them work so well. So basically hearing you say the same thing, it's just very interesting, and it just kind of like lit up in my head. But yeah, so let's actually go back to the story. Let's go back to moving the team to Kenya.
Yeah.
Why Kenya, and like how did that go? How did you guys just like navigate that whole situation?
Yeah, so we had launched in Tanzania. We were operating trips there. We wanted to get into Kenya. And so we moved to Nairobi with the intention of, okay, let's set up operations in Kenya so we can actually start selling trips.
Yeah.
Because it's a big hub. But also Nairobi is a very connected city. You can land in Nairobi, you can take an Uber from the airport into, like Nairobi Westlands area, whatever. Doing that in Arusha, not possible. You can't just expect to arrive at the airport and then take an Uber.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get one. So honestly, from the basis of actually being in Nairobi, I thought, okay, if we're going to be out here positioned for a couple months, let's actually be in more of like a city town where we can actually, have more outlets in the evenings and the weekends. So that was the basis of moving to Nairobi. It was, okay, we need to expand into Kenya. And then 2, it's a good city for us to actually just live in. There were some conferences going on at the time too. So that was the notion of why we chose, to live in Nairobi. Plus, it's only a 4-hour drive from Nairobi to Arusha, crossing through the border and everything. So for us, it was like, okay, we can also get into the tourist hub of Tanzania when we need to. So even this September, we're going to be going back to Nairobi.
Nice.
We'll just be based out of there for a bit.
So then how did that lead to you getting meeting some of the angels that you met?
Yeah.
Did you meet them in Nairobi, or did you?
Yeah.
How did that go about?
Yeah. So we have a really good advisor on our team. His name's Doug. Doug is like literally the connector.
How did you meet him?
We went to Waterloo with Doug.
Nice.
So Doug was, even in Waterloo, he was kind of like the guy. Like everyone knew Doug.
You just go for the guy you go to for everything.
Exactly.
He just knows
like
everyone.
Everyone knew Doug. It's like he was kind of like, I don't know, the name per se.
Yeah.
And we sat down with Doug before going to Tanzania the first time out here in Toronto, and then we had pitched him on CloudSafaris and then brought him on as an advisor for us. And then Doug honestly has made so many intros for us. And those intros actually being 2 of the angels that we had on board. 2 of the 3 angels that we had on board. And so we met those first angels actually via Doug. At the time, these angels were running the Travly network. Doug was always pushing with us, hey, like, chat with these guys. Like they have a really good product that they're building out. Let's see if we can find a way to work with them. So after a couple conversations with them, we posted some stuff on their Instagram channels. We got a good amount of traffic coming in from that. And then Doug just happened to meet with one of the founders of Travly in person that day, or one of the next month later or something. And then just floated the idea that we were raising at the time. And the Travly founders were like, hey, like send us a pitch deck. Let's hop on a call and let's see if we can actually just, fund them essentially. So then had another conversation with them, and then they love what we were doing. It worked really well with the Travly brand that they were building. And that was it. It was like a very easy conversation. So we went from, I can't even count like the number of VCs I pitched before that, where as soon as I mentioned Africa, they said no, to having a conversation with these people who were very aligned with what we were doing. And it was very easy to get investment from them on that front after.
Do you think that had to do with the fact that they themselves were in the travel tech space?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were building, they still are like building Travly.
Yeah.
Travly is one of the largest travel networks on social media. They have like over 40 million followers across their network now. They have all the pages for at travel, at hotels, at destinations, I think, at safaris now too. And so they kind of understood what we were doing, what we were building on ground for the safaris that we were pushing. And so, yeah, it was a very easy conversation because we were both in the same space. And I think that's the importance of like, having people and like, approaching and pitching people who have actually the same kind of like, who understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
I think that's like a very important thing. The third angel we actually had was Benji Fernandes. So he was running Nala Money. And how that came about, he posted something on LinkedIn one day about the Rafiki API, which was like they spun up an API out of Nala to send cross-border payments like as a business. I commented on one of his posts. He reached out to me and then ended up having a call. And then that Rafiki conversation turned into, what are we building at CloudSafaris? And then at the end of the call, it was like, hey, like send me the details. I'll cut you a check.
Cool.
So yeah, it was very serendipitous.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool thing about it's actually Benji too. My dad and his dad actually grew up together in Tanga. So
Really?
I'd always been hearing and like following his journey throughout. And then yeah, this ended up he's a very busy guy, but ended up just connecting with him, and that was that.
So for let's talk about Benji. For Benji, he's building in the fintech space, and you're building in the travel space. How has it been like just kind of managing a relationship with like an angel that understands the space, and that there's like some parallels with what you're building, but has been in the space for like way longer? What are some of the benefits that you've realized from that relationship beyond just like the fund or the money?
Yeah. So I think the coolest thing about like the angels that we had on board, everyone was strategic in a sense. So obviously the angels with the Travly network was huge.
Yeah.
Angel with Benji is big too, just because we send payments cross-border into Africa all the time. And so for us sending those payments cross-border, it's like we're eventually going to be using the Rafiki API, and the Nala network essentially to send that money cross-border. So that's kind of like the play that we will head towards. We're not using it right now, but essentially we're going to be integrating with it later on.
Nice.
It's going to make our payment flow a lot easier, because at the end of the day, we need to pay out our suppliers like on ground. And so that works on that front. For Benji, just as like an angel on us with a lot of experience in the space. I mean, I've had a couple conversations with Benji. I met him in London, almost missed my flight, meeting him that day. And then had a call with him, in Nairobi when I was there like a couple months ago. And the thing I love about Benji, I don't know if you follow him on socials or anything. He's a very funny guy on his socials, like especially with the slides and all of his stories and his posts.
Yeah.
He is like a sharp guy, very straight shooter. Like he will tell you straight on everything. So as soon as I have a conversation with him and we get into chats about the business and about like his business too, it's like everything is very like straight to the point. He doesn't cut corners. He doesn't make things sound like pretty. It's all like, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what I did. This is what worked for me. This is what might work for you. Like go out and go do it. Like put in the work.
Yeah.
So it's been very good to have conversations with him, because obviously he's also raised money for Nala from VCs, I think in like North America, and I don't know where else as well, but he has that basis of working and operating across Africa, and then also raising money from here. So yeah, it's been a really good relationship with him.
Very strategic. Yeah, I like that. And also just for the angels from Travly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, so the way I'm thinking about it is like that for the Benji front, you have like this African focused founder who has a lot of experience in the space and has a lot of relationships that could be beneficial, and whose platform you can integrate with. And then for Travly, I'm thinking about it from like a marketing standpoint. Yeah. Right. They have a huge social media following. They have a well-experienced founder in the travel space that you can, again, glean a lot of knowledge from. And that way, like, you're able to just like learn from different experiences. And they have stakes in the company too. So like they would give you advice because it's going to benefit them too in some way. And I think that's just really strategic. So for the Travly, I'm curious to know like how that relationship has been going, especially just from a marketing front, right? Being able to leverage their network and use that to, get CloudSafaris little more visibility.
Yeah. So continuing kind of along with the CloudSafaris journey, after we had sorted out the TICO licensing, we came back to Canada. We'd raised our round, and then we went direct to consumer. When we went direct to consumer, we realized very quickly that the problems that we were facing, every other travel company would face. So the same process when it comes down to booking, it would still take time and everything to nurture a customer to finally pay for something on ground. We then spun up our product to be B2B. And so we ended up white labeling all of our software completely. And the first test partner was Travly. And so Travly on their Safaris page, if you click on that link, that's all of our tech, essentially, that's running everything in the background. So it worked out very well with that, I guess, relationship with the Angels and then with the Travly network, because they ended up pushing all of their volume via the Safaris page, actually comes to us directly. And we have like an agreement with them based on like, you know, kind of like a revenue share that we have. But essentially everything that comes through that page funnels into our platform directly. We had launched with them pretty much in November. And it's like, that's when we started to like, things started to trickle in. And like literally we've got to the point in the past couple of months, they've been sending like millions in inquiries through us per month. And it's like we got to a point where our team was underwater just in terms of like how much we had to fulfill coming in, which is a great problem to have. But it was like, okay, that was like it's also just great to have a good relationship with them, with the Angels, the founders, just because they also understand everything that we're doing right now. And it's all for the benefit of, you know, Travly as a company, but then also just us as like them, for us as like an investment pretty much. So yeah, it's been a really good relationship to be able to work with them. And yeah, I'm excited for that partnership.
What other partnerships are you eyeing for the future? Yeah,
so we actually just launched with a modern travel agency in New York called Phros Travel. They have been growing like crazy. They actually just closed like a $40 million Series C. Oh, nice. I think it was like 60 million across their Series B, Series C. They have over 8,000 active travel advisors on their platform. 97% of them are new to the industry. And literally it's like, we just launched with them. They just crossed $1 billion in bookings, too. So just got set up with them, but all their travel advisors, if you're part of the Phros network, can essentially, use our product, to book trips in Africa, across, you know, East Africa right now. Yeah. So yeah, that's like a big partnership we had worked on. We have a couple more that are lined up right now, but they're just in the works pretty much.
So what's the vision for the B2B side of things? Because I feel like anyone that has worked on consumer products or direct to customer products know that for the most part, you need to have like a B2B side of things to really, really like get revenue. Yeah. And I think that's something that you guys also learned and that's working well for you. So what's the future of that looking like? What's the end goal? Yeah,
I want to get as many people to the continent as possible. And so for me, that all comes down to, okay, if we can tap into as many distribution networks as we can, whether that's, you know, the Travlys, Phros, Expedia, Booking.com, then we're going to go ahead and do that. It's like whether you, in the future, it's like when you book a trip and a safari to, you know, East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, whether that's directly through us or via one of the partners, it's going to be fulfilled by our tech. That's like the goal. That's pretty much the goal. Yeah. That's it.
So I think this is a great segue to something that you recently published. You wrote about how travel in Africa is just 1% built, right? So what is that 99% that you think is still missing?
Yeah. This comes down to the core problems. And to be honest, I kind of stole this phrase from Benji because Benji has like, payments in Africa is 1% built. Yeah. But yeah, the premise of it being that, living on ground with these local operators and interacting with them, everything is run via those spreadsheets, PDFs, emails. And so you can't find offerings for safaris easily online that are easily bookable because all of this information is locked on ground into these different, into this offline data pretty much. Now, you may be able to find a safari on, like one of these OTAs that have like a package that you can book out. But as soon as you want to swap one hotel on one night, this is where that whole process spins up. You have to reach out to a local operator on ground. Local operators get back to you with quote prices. You change your travel dates by one date. That whole process spins back up again. So we take this to the roots of being on ground, in East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. These people are running via offline data. Now, it's 90% of these like emerging markets are run by small to medium-sized businesses. There's these mom and pop shops who have their own local tour operating business, their own hotel chains on ground. And essentially for them, it's like it comes down to a basis of there's a lot of really good software that they can use to get them online, to get them out into, the Western world. But for them, it makes more sense to hire locally than it is for them to actually use the software that comes out from the West. One reason, they're going to spend thousands of dollars using software that comes out of, North America and Europe to actually use on ground. It's actually much more affordable to actually just hire someone locally to run everything on ground. Yeah. Plus, you actually get just a pair of eyes on it rather than, the software that they're using, and they can employ local people on ground, which is great.
Yeah.
So when I say it's 1% built, you have all this offline data. When it comes down to bookings, you can't book things automatically on ground. Things still have to go through one layer of actually connecting with people on ground to, actually like sort out everything, like sort out an actual booking that happens. The next thing is actually, when it comes down to an infrastructure standpoint, it's like you can't just, the way that you'd book travel in Europe, very different than the way that you'd book travel in Tanzania. If you land at Kilimanjaro International Airport in Tanzania, you can't just expect to book an Uber to the Serengeti National Park. First of all, you can't even book an Uber from, Kilimanjaro International Airport. There's not a lot of people who have the ride sharing, capabilities there on ground. That's one. Two, it's going to take you about 9 hours to drive to the Serengeti. And you have to pass through 2 national parks in order to get there. So you go through the Ngorongoro Crater, and then you'll get to the Serengeti National Park. Those park fees have to be paid for by local tour operators on ground. And so when I say it's 1% built, you have all these different contexts and nuances towards travel, in these regions. You have them, and all of this is essentially run by these small to medium-sized businesses. And so the case is, how do you actually build up a lot of the infrastructure for the small to medium-sized businesses to get them online so that they can sell their products to, travelers over here? Yeah.
So that's so interesting. There's a lot of context that, because I've never traveled, beyond just South Africa and Ghana, like the main spot. Like I have never traveled to Tanzania, but that's something that I want to do in the nearest future. And I did not know that you can't just like get to the airport and call an Uber.
Yeah.
I'm just so used to I know you wrote about that too, right?
Yeah.
That travel, like booking travel in Africa is very different from like booking a trip to New York. It's not the same thing, right? There's a lot of hidden fees, a lot of costs, a lot of context that if you don't have, it can really mess up your trip. And I think that that's like the opportunity that you guys are building on, and you're hoping to capitalize on to just make that easier, right?
Yeah.
So what's the future looking like? If you're thinking 5 to 10 years down the line, what is CloudSafaris going to look like at that point?
Yeah. So the mission that we're on right now, we have 2 primary things. One, we want to make the booking experience for booking travel in Africa as easy as booking an Airbnb. So making it the smoothest, easiest possible experience in order to actually book. And then 2, get pricing down so that you're actually paying the cheapest rates that you would get. The way that we want people to think about CloudSafaris as a platform and the tech that we're building is that just like if you were to have a local friend who were living in Tanzania, Kenya, the same prices that you would get paying with that local is the same prices that you're going to get directly on our platform. So that's essentially what our mission is, and everything that we're going to do over the next 5 years is essentially geared towards that. So we're in Kenya, Tanzania right now. We are just opening up in Uganda. Next spot after will be Rwanda and then South Africa.
Nice.
And I guess like Southern Africa, Namibia, Botswana. But essentially the plan over the next 5 years, get across the continent and then just give those 2 things. Just make the booking experience as simple as booking an Airbnb, as clean as booking, on Airbnb. And then 2, make it the best possible pricing so that, when you book a trip there, you're not getting ripped off. You're getting the best possible price on ground.
The bigger companies are beginning to notice this opportunity in the Safari space. So I learned that recently Uber launched their Safari experience like this. And I was very surprised to see that because I felt like I just never thought that they would think that far. So how are you guys thinking about the bigger companies possibly coming into this space and, doing their thing? What's going to be the competitive advantage, I want to say? Yeah.
So with Uber actually launching Safaris, I think it was like a journey from Cape Town to one of the local spots over there. The way I look at it, like these companies coming in, especially like if you take this Uber Safari launch as an example, that trip was actually marked up pretty much by 100%. It's like if you knew that the operator who was actually running the trip on ground, that local company, if I don't know how to pronounce it, I think it's like Aquila or something. But that company, if you were to book directly with them, you'd get the same experience at half the rate. So the premise is like, a bigger company can come in, like Uber and what they did, But when it comes down to the pricing, if you know just exactly who runs those things on ground, like the booking experience or like the cost that you're going to pay is going to be much less than what you would pay for a bigger company coming in. For a lot of these bigger companies, to be honest, also like getting into the market, a lot of them work on the basis of what's called as like a GDS. And so you already have a lot of like this tech that's connected so that they can make automatic bookings to different properties, lodges on ground. But then you run into that same issue. When it comes down to, you know, different safari zones across Africa, most of it is offline. So these bigger companies coming in, when they're looking at it, there's a problem to tackle from the infrastructure standpoint first, before they can actually go and start selling trips directly to their customers. And so, yeah, when we look at also just like, you know, I guess competition in a lens from like bigger players coming in, I think this is like the best thing about being a startup is that you can move very quickly. We switched from B2C to B2B in the span of 2 weeks. We had a product that was like ready to go that we could ship out to different companies. The things that we do today, we're able to actually ship out very quickly because we're able to move quickly and make decisions very quickly. Whereas a large organization, there's a lot more like bureaucracy. You have to go through a lot more decision makers in order to actually go ahead and actually do things on ground. So yeah. I honestly, I welcome competition. Like it's at the end of the day, like we're building for these local operators on ground, for these local small to medium sized businesses. So.
My final question to you would just really be around the travel space. So from this conversation, I've actually learned a lot about the travel space in Africa. Because I mean, I know that inter-Africa travel is like a whole thing. Yeah. But there's just a lot of other nuances that I just didn't have context to. And so for people who are curious about the space, how would you recommend that they go about just learning about the opportunities that exist in this space? Yeah,
I guess is this like travel specific or in general, like just building in?
You can talk about travel and then maybe just in Africa too.
Yeah. Honestly, I think to learn about the opportunities, like the best thing is actually just to travel there. From a travel perspective, travel there. And as soon as you try to book something online, you'll realize very quickly that it's quite difficult to do. As soon as you want to customize certain things, it's quite difficult. As soon as you want to, you know, figure out what your logistics are when you arrive on ground at Kilimanjaro International Airport, it's like it's going to be difficult to do. You're going to run into some pain points. You know, when you're in Nairobi, you can book an Uber from the airport. It's like you don't need to pre-book like your journey from there. It's like doing and traveling and actually across the continent, you'll realize very quickly like two things. One, it's difficult to book things. And two, you're actually going to get the best possible rates if you actually book locally. And so the combination of those two is like, okay, like why can't people from here do that right now? That's a quick and easy way to understand like from the problems from the perspective of like booking trips on ground from a travel side of things.
Yeah. From like the continent side. So just from like, if you're wanting to learn more about beauty for that continent, especially for people who maybe like you, didn't grow up, like have roots in the continent, but like didn't exactly grow up there. How'd you go about kind of just navigating that? Like you had to at some point move back, you had to travel a lot, like, but for people that maybe don't have that opportunity, how'd you recommend they just go about learning more about what's happening in the space and how they can just be part of it?
Yeah. Honestly, I think like learning about that space from here is like you have to get involved in the community. It's like get involved in as many events and everything as you can. But to be honest, at the end of the day, it's like the best place to learn is actually there.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much of like local context and culture around things that like you won't actually experience or understand until you actually like step foot there and like understand. It's like I know how our local operators work now because I've gotten to meet them in person. I've gotten to meet their teams. I understand how they work from, you know, their internal side of things. I know what their offices look like. It's like being there on ground is very, very different than actually, you know, just trying to read from abroad. Sure. It's like you have to understand what it is to be there on ground. Like you have to experience, like from a travel side of things for us, it was like experience the drive going from the airport into your closest hotel when you land in Nairobi, when you land at Kilimanjaro Airport, when you land at Zanzibar, when you land in Kigali in Rwanda. It's like just know what the drive is like going from the airport to your hotel. And in that drive, you're going to learn a lot. It's like in the drive from Nairobi into the hotel or Jero, like in Kilimanjaro Airport into your closest hotel. you'll see the overtaking on the highways.
Yeah.
Like you'll see all these small things, and it's just like it gives you context towards if people are coming in, how are you going to shape things around there? People operating in the ground over there. It's like, how are people dealing with each other? Like, how is money moving around on ground? How is it from a trust standpoint when you actually deal with people there in person? The best thing is actually just honestly to be there. And it doesn't, it's not expensive. Like people think that, like traveling is quite expensive. To be honest, like my 1 month rent in Toronto is like way more than like 2 months of me living out in an Arusha.
Yeah.
Like, mind you, maybe the flight cost is the biggest thing that you're going to pay for. But like when you're there on ground, it's like you can live in a very affordable fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end this conversation. I think this has been a really great conversation for me. Just learning more about the space, because there's a lot just that I didn't know, just because I don't get to meet a lot of people that are beauty in the travel space. And you are well versed with the space. I mean, you're beautying in that space. I'm really excited about what you're beautying. And I think maybe actually the last question I want to ask, this always happens. I always say last question. It never is the last question. But the actual last question I want to ask is like, what are you most excited about right now? Because one of the things that you said in a write-up was that you would die for what you're beautying right now. I remember that it was a very intense statement. So knowing that, like, or you being able to say that about what you're beautying, I want to know, like, what are you most excited about?
Yeah. Okay. All right. If I start rambling on this, just cut me off.
Oh, good.
I wrote that statement and pretty much like, I'll die for what I'm building right now.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of thoughts around this like recently. It's going to sound maybe a bit like negative, but in a way, but like, honestly, like to be candid, at the end of the day, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Like it's inevitable. So it's like, how do you want to live your life? And for me, I wake up every single day, like very passionate about the work I'm doing. I can work till 12 in the nights. I work on the weekends. It doesn't feel like work to me. I love what I'm doing. And I'm really excited about building what we're building every single day. I'm excited for what we're going to build and give to these local operators on ground. I'm excited to send them customers and send travelers there on ground, and the experiences and the reviews we get back from customers who come back and say like, hey, this is like, the best trip I've had in a lifetime. I'm excited to come back again and explore a different country with you. Like that's what like drives me at the end of the day. It's like, like when I wrote that post on like, I will die for what I'm building right now, it was like also on the basis of like money. It's like, I find like we have a big emphasis around like money and like, the billions of dollars. And like, yeah, of course, like you want like a big payday at the end, but like money's just a means to an end. At the end of the day, like for me, it comes down to like a couple things. Like, am I building what I love every single day? Yes. Do I get to spend time with my family and friends and like the people who are closest to me? Yes.
Yeah.
And like in the future, all I would want to do is just be able to, provide for like my wife and my kids. Like that's it. So from that standpoint of when I wrote that statement, it was like, it's like money is just a means to an end, but I would die for what I'm building right now just because I'm so passionate about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Can wake up every day and I'm confident about what we're building. I get to build for people on the continent. Like that to me is just the best.
I think the energy, just from talking to you, I can feel like the energy and the care and the thoughtfulness just behind what you guys are building. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see where it goes. Thank you so much for this conversation, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Such a great time. And I look forward to seeing you around.
Yeah. Take you to Tanzania. Let's go on a trip.
I would actually love that. I actually do want to go to Tanzania, but anyways. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for making it to the end. I hope you learned something. I think this was a really great conversation for me personally, and I hope it was for you too. Thank you.